Street.
Matt Baker, college football writer for the Tampa Bay Times, covers the Gators, the Seminoles, USF, among others. And he joins us, also a Heisman Trophy voter, joins us on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. And Matt, I brought you on because Paul had his who teams have benefited the most from the transfer portal. And yes, he's an FSU guy, but you gave me the nugget earlier that back in December, during the first signing period, that the Bulls of USF had a very successful transfer portal haul.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. As of the early signing period when that was happening in mid-December, USF had the number one transfer portal class in the country, according to 247. Some of it was a lot of quantity. USF needed some experience now. They needed some talent now. So they went a lot more transfer portal than some of the other schools. But also there's a lot of quality in there. I think the Bulls did a good job kind of doing what SMU has done to some degree up in Dallas, where they were looking at guys who, some talented players who maybe went to Power 5 schools, didn't work out there, want to come back and play closer to home. USF got a guy, Clyde Pinder, who was a blue chip recruit at Armwood High School just outside Tampa, got him to come back. Got a James Gordon, a linebacker from Minnesota who's from the Tampa area, got him to come back. So that's kind of one of the ways that they're trying to build that up to start winning now, which they absolutely need to do.
All right, for FSU, Mike Norvell, I think he probably has a little bit more leash than most of the people would give him, in that they just changed athletic directors. It was way worse than I think a lot of people understood, and he's done a pretty good job so far at FSU, but he really needed to kind of crush this transfer portal at wide receiver, and he appears to have done that so far. Now, we haven't seen any play, but that's where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at Winston Wright from West Virginia. You look at Deuce Spann, who I think who's a Tampa kid from Lakewood High School from Illinois. He's got a lot of upside. You look at the receiver from Oregon as well. They absolutely needed talent at receiver. When I looked at how Florida State's season unfolded last year, obviously not making the Bulls unacceptable there. But what jumped out is the lack of dudes they had at receiver and at defensive back. Florida State's one of the schools that prides itself on being the DBU thing. And you look at just the amount of sheer skill, talent, and speed that the state of Florida high schools produce every year. For Florida State to be, frankly, unremarkable at receiver and lacking at defensive back was mind-boggling. And it happened time and time again. You look at the breakdown that cost them the Jacksonville State game. You look at all the times over the course of the year where their quarterback would throw it up in a 50-50 ball and the other team would come down with it because their receiver couldn't make a play. So they absolutely needed some immediate impact players at receiver. And again, we'll see whether that, Micah Pittman and some of those guys will work out. But FSU at least realized this was a problem and tried to address it.
Matt, how would you describe the exodus that FSU is counteracting by bringing guys in? Has it been super impactful? What are some of the names that maybe are losses, or has it basically been guys that you sort of expected would probably move on that moved on?
Yeah, so I think we have to remember just all the transfer, all the chaos that has happened at Florida State the last couple of years, right? I mean, it's not that long ago where Jimbo left. And then the mess that happened thereafter and Willie Taggart, and then you have a transition class with Mike Norvell, and those are always really tough. And the early signing day, it's a hard thing where you're going to have a lot of attrition. So you kind of add those up, and there have been a lot of players leaving, including a lot of really talented guys. Jan McCluster, a linebacker from here in the Tampa area that I thought was going to be that is talented. I thought was going to be a playmaker. Chubba Purdy, who was supposed to be the quarterback of the future, going to Nebraska. So to some degree, this is what's expected. But Florida State's also bringing in some guys, trying to balance it out with some guys coming in. Will it end up being a net win for them? I don't know, but it's going to have to be better than it was, because what's happened at Florida State is not sustainable. I think Norvell, to your point, does have a longer leash here, where unless things are catastrophic next year or the fan base gives up on him, or both, I would expect him to be the coach in 23 as well. But Florida State can't miss a bowl again. That's not acceptable there. That's just not acceptable, and it's not going to fly.
How much for all the teams in Florida right now is this a time to strike while the iron's hot? Because everybody is in chaos. All three of the major teams have new coaches. One of the teams is going to a new conference, and they've got the most steam behind them in UCF. But is there kind of maybe not a mandate, but something to that, like, hey guys, like this is the time to reboot the program when the other three or other two aren't doing that well either?
Yeah, this is a time where Florida State should be doing well. And honestly, I think kind of the flip side of that is one of the things that did in Dan Mullen with the Gators, particularly on the recruiting trail, because Miami was in Manny Diaz, his future was in jeopardy for quite some time. He didn't click with the Kings. So he was on his way out, or so it seemed, for much of the year. And Mike Norvell hadn't gotten it off the ground really at Florida State. And Dan Mullen, when he was with the Gators, could not capitalize on the recruiting trail. I mean, Florida State ended up signing a top 15 class. I think it ended up being, or top 10 for a while. And Dan Mullen wasn't close. And to me, that was one of the indictments of Mullen as a recruiter, is that the other guys are down and you're not able to capitalize on it. So I think, to your point, that is something true with Florida State right now, where, Florida and Miami both have new coaches. I think both of them have the chance to be very good. Statistically, one of them will probably flop and the other one will probably do pretty well, because that's just the way coaching hires work. But the fact is, they're both starting over. And Florida, I think in particular, is starting a little bit lower than people should, than I think most people recognize, with just the talent they have coming back, or the lack thereof. So there's going to be some issues with the Gators, and there's going to be first-year issues with the Canes as well. And this should be a time where FSU should capitalize on that, certainly on the field, but also in recruiting in the portal as well.
Matt, as you know, as you mentioned, UCF is a part of the future of the Big 12 in 2023, and I know that is something that they're pumped up about and ready for it. And then there's always still that kind of, it hasn't really been much said the last several weeks, but the possibility that USF could be a part of a second wave or a Chapter 2. Have you heard much about that in your area?
So USF, I think, is going to be a very interesting school to watch moving forward. Obviously, I'm biased because I'm 30 minutes away from their campus. But they are making a lot of steps, trying to do things to fix their problems. On the field, they have not been good the last few years. They have been bad, and some years very bad. And that's not acceptable. And they're trying to change that. And they're being patient with their head coach, who definitely needs more time to see what he can do or what he can't do. But USF got way behind in facilities. I mean, way behind. They just broke ground this year on an indoor practice facility. I'm not a huge facilities guy, but in the state of Florida, where it rains every single day from June through September, you need an indoor facility. And they finally are making progress on the ground. I have seen it. That's happened. The other big thing is they're working on building an on-campus football stadium. That's still years away. They're still in the planning stages. Where would it be? How much would it cost? That sort of thing. But they realize that what they've done with facilities over the years of being stagnant, that did not work. And, their little brother is now the big brother. UCF has lapped them and gone ahead to the Big 12. And if USF isn't careful, if it continues to do nothing or not do enough, it's in danger of getting left behind. And depending on what happens with super leagues and all that stuff, it's an existential crisis for the Bulls. I don't think that's an exaggeration. So I say that to say USF is doing a lot of things behind the scenes to try to get the infrastructure in place and to try to start winning more games. Again, that's why the transfer portal class was so big, so that when this happens again, when there's another wave, whether that's in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, USF is in position to capitalize on it the way the Bulls and the way Houston and BYU and Cincinnati were this time.
Matt, good stuff. Really good stuff across the board, the state of Florida. Thank you, Matt. Matt Baker, Tampa Bay Times, with us on 365 Sports and Sikkim 365 Radio. A couple of notes again. Scott Drew will join us in a couple of hours. No, yeah, about an hour.